Recording in progress.
We'll just hold on for a second.
Councilmember Pedori, can you hear us?
Yes, now I can hear you. There was
Okay.
no voice earlier.
Thank you.
Councilmember, can you state for the record the issue with the person alone in the room or whatever?
That there's no one in the room over 18 with you? Pardon
there-
me, over 18, under 18's okay.
There's no one over 18 here, correct?
All right, thank you. And I will also reflect for the record that Councilmember Walking Stick is absent tonight. So we do have 6 members. We're going to be taking roll call votes. And I will ask Mayor Pro Tem Emilio to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
For which it still stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. And now at this time, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll go ahead and approve the agenda, and I would like to move 12A to the beginning of the regular agenda.
Excellent. All right, motion. We have a motion.
So,
Second by Rao, motion by Emilio. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Emilio,
Yes,
Councilmember Rao, Councilmembers Pedori,
Aye.
McDonald,
She said aye.
Rao. Yeah, okay.
Got them mixed up, but we got 2 ayes.
So we have 2 ayes, okay.
Yes.
And then Mayor Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Garfield.
Aye.
Motion carries 601 with Councilmember Walking Stick absent.
Okay, we'll go ahead and move on to item 2. 2A is Mayor's Proclamation. I have a proclamation that I've signed for the Government and Finance Professionals Week, and I'll go ahead and read it at this time, and then I'll invite Mr. Marsh to step up. This is Government Finance Professionals Week, whereas the California Society of Municipal Finance Officers is the state's leading professional organization dedicated to promoting excellence in financial management for California's local governments. And whereas government finance professionals help to ensure financial transparency, accountability, and responsible stewardship of public funds. And whereas these professionals play a critical role in managing complex budgets, complying with state and federal law, maintaining accurate financial reporting and compliance with government standards, administering fee studies and enterprise funds, and supporting long-term financial sustainability. Now, therefore, I, Nick Smith, Mayor Pacific Grove, hereby proclaim the last week of March as Government Finance Professionals Week and encourage all residents to recognize and appreciate the hard work and contributions of these finance professionals. Thank you very much for all your work, and please step forward, Mr. Marsh. Yeah, you can clap at this time if you like. Check. Oh, so thank you very much for coming up, Fred.
Thank you.
Here's your proclamation,
Thank you, Graham.
and we'll take a little photograph.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Can I just say?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Just really quick. I just.
Red is-
Yeah, I just want to thank basically in particular, all of my staff in the admin services department. I mean, they just do such an outstanding job for the city. As you know, we've really been recognized for our quality of work, and it's due in large effort to our staff in admin services. So I'm really fortunate to have those staff. And it's a great recognition that CSFMO has recently started this year. So I wanted to just make sure that our department was recognized for all their great efforts. That was it.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your work. And now at this time, I'm going to have another proclamation. This is going to be Developmental Disabilities Awareness Month. And we're proud to join the state of California and other states around the country, raising awareness about the many ways in which people with intellectual and developmental disabilities can contribute to strong, diverse communities across our state. And March has been designated as a time to recognize people with disabilities, including individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and to highlight their contributions, their vital contributions to our communities. And also, Gateway Center has longstanding roots in Pacific Grove and throughout the county, supporting adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities through residential, day, and community-based programs. So at this time, I'd like to welcome up a representative of Gateway Center to come up and receive the proclamation, and also a chance to make a statement. And I believe it's Michael Gonzalez, is that correct? Are you the CEO? Okay, here you go, Mr. Gonzalez.
Also one of our members.
Hi, how are you?
Can I take a group photo, both of us?
Yeah.
Come on over.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gonzalez. Would you like to address the council? All right.
Paul, thank you all so much for recognizing this. I am the new executive director and president for Gateway Center of Monterey County, which we're located here in Pacific Grove. My name is Mike Gonzalez, and I started here just about a year ago. And for decades, Gateway Center has been part of the community supporting adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And Gateway Center has been part of this community supporting adults for many, many years. Our mission is very simple. We're here to really ensure that every individual with disabilities has the opportunity to live an independent life, one that's full of inclusion and access to our community. Across Monterey County, thousands of families are part of the intellectual disability community, and supported by a network of partners like the Regional Center and Gateway Center. Together, we work to ensure that people are not only receiving services, but are fully included as neighbors, employees, and active members of the community. But importantly, our work is about people, individuals with talents and goals and voices. And this moment is really important because we're uplifting them and making them feel valued. And I have the honor of inviting actually Whitney Clark, one of our members, participants of Gateway Center, and she's here to say a few words. So I'm going to invite Whitney up and say a few words.
Thank you, Michael. There you go.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you again, Mayor Smith and the council members. And I invite you all to Gateway Center anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Appreciate you coming down. Congratulations. We'll move on to item 3, is council and staff announcements. Does anyone on the council have any announcements? Yes.
Thank you. I realized I hadn't written it down, but one thing we do want to point out for the public is, well, a couple of things. We're in the pupping season now. You've probably seen the fence go up. So thank you very much to Public Works for taking care of that for us and for getting the adorable little seal signs that people like to take pictures with up and out. We wanted to let people know that we do unfortunately have instances of avian flu in the marine mammal community now. And they have found an otter in San Mateo, I believe it was, and an elephant seal down at Año Nuevo. So there are concerns that this could be happening more locally as well. So we really want to make sure that the public is aware of this. And if community members see people approaching a dead or an injured animal, to please be aware to call, for example, the SPCA. They can guide you to the right place, or the Marine Mammal Stranding. Even the police department, the non-emergency number can lead you to the right place. But just want to make sure the public is aware of that so that we can keep an eye and keep everyone safe. Thanks.
Yeah, go ahead and Julio.
Last Friday, we had congratulations go out, went to PG luncheon by the Pacific Grove Chamber. I'll just read real quick. Excellence of the Year Hospitality, Charles Pacific, the Charles, and then the restaurant was the Spotted Duck. Excellence in business was the Monterey Aquatic Therapy. Nonprofit, Pacific Grove Pony, Paul Black. New adventure achievement was Colette's Ice Cream. Outstanding business partner was the Quill.
Thank you for that. And we'll go ahead and appreciate the announcements. We'll go ahead and recognize staff for announcements. Mr. Mogensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We do have a couple of announcements tonight. The first thing I want to let everybody know about is we have 2 study sessions that are tentatively planned for our next 2 council meetings. So on April 1st, we're looking at bringing a study session to the council that will discuss our overview of basically our communications strategy and philosophy, and walk through quite a bit of information with the council, which includes an overview of what we're currently doing, some places where maybe we could improve, and then talk about kind of a common strategy at the end of all, and come out with somewhat of a strategic plan, if you will, on communications focused type stuff to help us to continue to improve our communications here in the city, which I will say, I feel like we've made some good leaps this year. The other one is April 15th. We are going to have Monterey One come and kind of continue discussion that Paul Sheeto began at our last council meeting about the electrical station that they want to relocate. So the idea will be that our residents can come and ask questions about that project at that time of the actual project proponents. So that'll be on the 15th, and we'll start that one on 5 o'clock too. last item for me, and then I'm going to turn it over to the deputy city manager, is I just wanted to highlight something that don't always do this, but the other day we received an email from our Chief Moore, and he was passing on appreciation for Sergeant Nagamini. And so you've all probably heard about the Casanova fire that happened where 90 people were displaced. They lost one. So I guess Paul did a great job that night, and he was instrumental in organizing all of the PD units that responded. He worked with the incident command that helped facilitate the accountability of displacement residents. So it's probably a pretty chaotic scene, and he did a great job there. So I just wanted to also recognize that and pass it along. And with that, I will turn it over to Joyce.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. I'm here to make an announcement on behalf of the Recreation Department to highlight 2 of their new program offerings. The first is Open Recreation Basketball. This is a new program that's for youth grades 6 through 12 and runs March 31st through May 26th, Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Pacific Grove High School gym. Coaching to be provided by the Pacific Grove Recreation Sports staff and PGUSD coaches Dan and Aubrey Powers. Weekly clinics will include skills development and play. And the second program is our youth track and field program, which is targeted for ages 5 through 14 and runs March 30th through May 27th, Mondays and Wednesdays at the PG High School track. And this season includes 4 or 5 track meets with local recreation departments. So it sounds like a lot of fun. Registration for both programs can be found online at cityofpacificgrove.org/recreation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further announcements? Mr. Mogensen? All right, we'll go ahead and move it on to item 4, general public comment. General public comment must deal with matters subject to the jurisdiction of the city that are not on the regular agenda tonight. So would anyone like to make general public comment at this time, online or in chambers? Seeing a couple hands go up online, so we'll take that.
Yes, sir. Carl Lindstrom, you have the floor.
First of all, the cost of special measure C is a disgrace to the voters of Pacific Grove instead of it being included in a general election. But I'd like to speak to the cannabis retail application permit process generally, as the last motion to pause the process was shut down without public comment as an information only topic. From March 4th meeting, residents learned that application stacking was an intended part of this process and built into the rules to incentivize revenue at $10,000 per lottery ticket for an opportunity to do business in an effort to maximize revenue to the city. What we all learned is that along the way, one entity bought 8 of the 10 lottery tickets. During the meeting, a council member asked staff, each one has a different EIN, is that correct? Staff answered, they have a different LLC, that is correct. But that wasn't the question from the council member. The claim that the FAQ on the application website that city staff informed all applicants that multiple applications from the same entity were permissible, allowing an applicant to stack the lottery deck by submitting multiple $10,000 application fees, essentially buying out the city's lottery process. City staff were asked, what if owners, individuals, or applicants with no common ownership in the applying entity have common ownership in other entities or a parent company or private contracts? Does that constitute economic ownership? City planning staff answered that there's no restrictions in the existing ordinance that would prohibit this. Staff did not utilize the same understanding definition that supersedes with the state standard of the definition under the Medical and Adult Use Cannabis Regulation Safety Act, which says that ownership is not only by equity state, but also by level of control, management, or authority over the business. In the city's own ordinance, it's written in subsection 23.92.020 that in the event of a conflict between these provisions of this chapter and provisions of the Medical Adult Use Cannabis Recreation or Safety Act, other applicable or state law, the restrictive provision shall control. I hope that this process is paused to see why the state definitions and state standards governing ownership in this process, clearly overseen by the state of California, were overlooked by both the consultants and the staff overseeing this project. Thank you for your time and your consideration in this matter.
Thank you. Inga Lorenzen Dormer.
Thank you. Was informed by the city clerk that the city notification signups, on the city site, the one that the staff has pushed us to sign up for, which I have signed up every committee, board, notification, everything for years, okay? But they push us to do this. But I was informed that it's only a so-called courtesy and could be delayed by several days. Legal noticing has occurred, but the public must go search through the city website, and I mean the entire city website, to find their own timely notification. And this is supposedly good communication, and I didn't receive the agenda for the city council meeting until Sunday in my notifications. And of course, it went out on Friday, which normally it would come to me, but these notifications are no longer timely and pertinent. And I'm wondering why this is supposedly a transparent process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No further hands, Mayor.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close general public comment. Take it to the consent agenda. The consent agenda deals with routine and non-controversial matters. May include actions on resolutions, ordinances, or public hearings for which testimony is not anticipated. Does anyone on the council wish to pull an item off of consent? And does anyone in the public, online or in chambers, wish to pull an item off of consent?
I have Jane Haynes has her hand raised. Jane Haynes?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, I wish to pull item, the written comment that I submitted earlier this week. It's consent and agenda item 9A. I want to pull that off of the consent agenda and to have a hearing on it.
So 9A?
Correct.
It's the letter of support for SB 922 layered vehicles. Is that what you'd like pulled?
Would you say that again? I'm hard of hearing.
A letter and written general comment is not pullable. That's item 4A. You can't pull that. 9A is the letter of support for Laird, it's SB 922 Senator Laird's vehicles, local agency charges, use of streets or highways.
No, that's not it. What
Okay.
I'm referring to is Pacific Coast 2023-30 to 2031 Housing Element Program.
Progress?
yeah.
9B? Okay. We'll put the
That-
housing progress report for you, ma'am. Thank you. We gotta get a vote first. So, yes, so, okay, and do I have a motion to approve consent, accepting therefrom 9B?
I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Second? All right, we have a motion by Emilio, second by Rao. We're gonna go ahead and take consent, accepting therefrom 9B, and we'll hear 9B right afterwards. I'll take a roll call vote, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Pro Tem Emilio?
Aye.
Councilmember Rao? Aye. Councilmembers Garfield? McDonald? Aye. Kaduri?
Aye.
Mayor Smith?
Aye.
Motion carries 601 with Councilmember Walking Stick absent.
All right, thank you very much. Now that we've passed the consent agenda, we'll take up item 9B, and I'll invite Mr. Biggs, our Community Development Director, to come forward.
Good evening, members of City Council. John Biggs with your Community Development Department. This item this evening is just a report for the City Council on the annual housing element report. It lists the status of the various programs of the yet to be certified housing element by the state, and then gives you an account of the affordable, or not the affordable units, but the new dwelling units that have been permitted and filed over the last, I think, this report covers the last 3 years, and I think one thing you'll notice from the report, which is a bit complicated, like all things housing element related from the state, you'll see that the majority of new housing units in Pacific Grove are accessory dwelling units. Those tend to be the ones that the city or the community is constructing the most of. That wraps up staff's report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions from council.
Okay, thank you very much. Go ahead and go out to public comment. We'll hear from Ms. Haynes on the matter.
Thank you.
Ms. Haynes.
Jane Haynes, you have the floor.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, I submitted a comment, a written comment earlier this week after trying honestly with a magnifying glass to understand the housing element annual progress report. I came away with 3 concerns. First, the numbers don't reconcile. The report says 20 units, but it also describes what appears to be 24 units. Secondly, at roughly 20 units per year, we are on track to meet only about 16% of our RHNA obligation by 2031. And third, and most important, I could not clearly identify measurable progress on most of the housing element programs. Therefore, I request the City Council please to request the staff give a clear report describing Pacific Grove's 2023 to 2031 housing element program, including a clear summary showing exactly where we stand, what has actually been completed, and what will be done, and when Pacific Grove's RHNA goal of 1,125 additional housing units. I believe that I am not alone in wondering what is going on. And I think that many members of the public would appreciate a clear explanation of what has happened so far, what is currently happening, and if possible, a way that the public could participate in decision-making. I believe that currently the public has no.
This is a document, is that correct, that we were required to establish when we submitted the housing element? So the dates won't update, but as we go along, we will be able to measure. And it's a little bit hard to do that now because the program hasn't been approved. So some of the programs haven't started yet because we're pending the approval. Is that correct?
This report from the Council of CME is an annual report, so it goes back to probably the 1970s when cities were to report on the progress they were making towards the programs that are part of the housing element. It's a way for the state to track the city's progress towards achieving those. And since the housing element period, the 6th cycle runs from 2023 to 2031, they want to see those dates that were in the approved housing element remain, so that in the future, I think if they can, get a chance to take the city to task, they can say, oh, you have not completed X number of the programs within the timeframes identified. That doesn't mean, however, that we are not working on the programs. We will begin, once we get the certification from the state, developing a timeline and a list of the programs to tackle first. There's a few that we're working on currently. Some are currently in progress, such as the Housing Rehabilitation Loan Program, and we're going to be going out and the council approved a resolution authorizing us to submit an application for a CDBG grant this year. So those are the things, or an example of things that we are going through right now to achieve and comply with all the programs. But it's an ongoing process. There is a lot of work, and it'll take a lot of resources to get it completed.
And one of those upcoming programs will be, and we do have it on the council goals, is to identify a housing project and other things that would actually then, once it's approved, start accelerating the building, correct?
That's correct. We're hoping that we'll be able to get some projects of some size so that we can kind of whittle away at that RHNA number.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for the comments, Ms. Haynes. However, Mr. Biggs, thank you very much for your report. I say we approve this. We've been doing this for several years now. Housing element and progress reward be approved. That's my motion.
I'm moving the recommended action. Do I have a second? Second by Rao. Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll take a roll call vote.
Mayor Pro Tem Amelio. Councilmember Rao.
Aye.
Councilmember Paduri.
Aye.
Councilmember McDonald. Aye. Councilmember Garfield. Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries 601 with Councilmember Walking Stick absent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biggs. So go ahead and we're going to take item 12A next. Now that we've completed the consent agenda, we're going to take item 12A due to time constraints by our consultant. And so at this time, we are going to hear the presentation of revenue measure survey results by True North Research and discussion of next steps. And I believe I'll recognize Mr. Mogensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. You've adequately described this item, but on November 19th of 25 and January 21st of this year, the council considered this professional services agreement with Props and Measures and the subconsultant of True North Research. And the purpose of this was, it had several phases, but the first initial phase of the agreement included the polling of Pacific Road residents to determine the knowledge and understanding of the city's fiscal constraints, to understand their perception of the city's services and infrastructure, to understand what outside external and internal factors would impact their support of any kind of potential revenue measure, and to determine overall if the polled respondents would be in support of any kind of a revenue measure based on the questions they were polled on. So we have completed that now at this time, and we have a presentation here to provide for you tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and recognize and turn it over to Timothy McLarney. He's a PhD and he's the president of True North Research, and he'll walk us through the presentation and get to explain all the fun facts about the numbers.
Well, thank you, and good evening, Mayor, members of council. Tim McLarney, president of True North Research. By way of background, we are a firm that for about 25 years has specialized in working with California cities as well as other types of public agencies around the state in using surveys to help them develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers that they serve. To date, my business partner and I, working as a two-person team, have designed and conducted over 1,500 research studies for public agencies. And about 2/3 of the work that we're doing these days is what you call revenue measure feasibility studies, like what we'll be talking about here tonight, where the goal is to understand if it's feasible to move forward with some type of revenue measure, and if it is feasible, to understand how might you go about structuring that measure in a way that it's consistent with the type of measure that your community is interested in supporting. Happy to say that we've got a long, successful track record doing this with public agencies. To date, of the measures that we've recommended go to ballot, 93% have ultimately been approved by voters, and we've helped our clients raise about $42 billion in voter-approved measures around the state. And so I mention that mainly because, for context, because as I go through tonight's presentation, I may make reference to how the results we're seeing here in Pacific Grove compare to what we might normally see when we're doing these type of studies for other cities. And I just wanted you to have a sense from the experience base from which I'd be speaking. Finally, I welcome questions from council along the way or at the end, whichever is your preference, Mayor. Okay, so on to the results here. I guess I need to share my screen here first. Sorry, let me do that for you. All right, you got that? Big blue screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, so before we talk about the results, helpful to take a moment to review the purpose of the study as well as the methodology. In terms of the purpose of the study, these revenue measure studies are designed to really address the three bullets that you see here on the slide. The first is to answer that basic question of, is it feasible? And what I mean by that is if you as a council were to choose to place a measure on the November ballot, does it have a reasonable chance of success? The answer to that question isn't always yes. Sometimes we do this work and when you get the data back, no matter how you stare at it, there's really no path to get you from where you are today to where you need to be viable on election day. And if that's the case, I'll be the first person to tell you that. I find that, I think it's the last thing council wants or staff want or even the community wants is to invest in a process like this that ultimately doesn't have a reasonable shot at success. When we do find that there's feasibility, that second bullet kicks in gear. What we're trying to understand is how might you go about structuring this measure in a way that it's consistent with the type of measure that your community is interested in supporting. There's a lot of components to a revenue measure. There's, obviously the tax rate itself, how much is the price tag, so to speak, how you intend to use the funds, what sort of accountability provisions are built in, et cetera, et cetera. So these are all decisions that ultimately need to be made before you as a council could place a measure on the ballot, and the survey can help guide those decisions. And then finally, it's also an opportunity for us to understand the role that information plays in shaping voters' opinions about your measure, and that in turn can help with future communications. So in terms of the methodology, we use the same methodology here that we always use when we're doing revenue measure feasibility studies. And the first question I always ask myself when you're sitting down to design a study like this is, what election are we thinking this measure could be on? The reason for that is different elections have different turnouts. And as you expand or shrink turnout, you will tend to get a somewhat different profile to the group of participating voters that would ultimately decide the fate of a measure. And so in this case, we were looking ahead to that November 2026 general election that's coming up later this year. And the way we pull our samples is we identify among all registered voters within the community, those who, based on their registration date, what elections they participated in since that point, as well as other demographics we expect are actually going to cast ballots in this gubernatorial general election in November. Once we've identified those likely November voters, we use a process called stratified and clustered random sampling. I can get into the details of that if you like, but suffice to say what it ensures is that both at the sampling stage as well as at the end of our data collection, we have a sample that is representative of that likely November universe on all the dimensions that we know tend to drive how voters behave when it comes to these types of tax measures. So the balance in our sample by age, gender, partisanship, household party type, where they live within the city, that balance matches the balance in the November universe. And that is one of the keys to making sure that this research is reliable. Once we pulled our sample, we used 3 different recruiting methods: email, text, and telephone. The email and text invitations have a hyperlink that folks can click to come in and take the survey. Each one of those is unique to that respondent. That allows us to protect the integrity of the site so that only those folks who are randomly sampled could access it. They could complete it one time only. Folks had the opportunity to take this either by telephone with a professional interviewer or online, whichever was their preference. We wound up completing 427 interviews as part of this survey. And with a random sample of 427, it allows you to estimate the opinions of all of your likely November voters with a certain margin of error due to sampling. In this case, that's plus or minus 4.6% at the 95% confidence level. So what that means is we can be 95% confident that the results we'll talk about in tonight's presentation are within 4.6% of what we would have found had we spoken with every one of the likely November voters in Pacific Grove. Okay, on to the results. So we like to start out these surveys with some warm-up questions, get folks thinking about their community, kind of get them into the groove of taking the survey. The first of these was overall how they would rate the overall quality of life in Pacific Grove. Would they say it's excellent, good, fair, poor, very poor? As you can see here on the slide, you had about 46% who rated it as excellent, another 47% who rated it as good. You combine those and the decimal points, you got 93% of your likely November voters rate the overall quality of life in the community as excellent or good. You had about 6% who said fair, and you have less than 1% who said poor or very poor. I get to ask this question for a lot of cities around the state, and I can tell you this is at the upper echelon of the quality of life ratings that we would see in most communities. So this is also something that's usually a good thing when it comes to there's usually a pretty good correlation between the perceived quality of life in the community and a community's willingness to support these types of revenue measures, because if they really like where they live and you have a measure that's designed to sort of maintain the quality of life you've grown accustomed to having, those types of measures tend to bode well when you have a group of voters who have a high opinion where they live. So after that question, we went on to ask, if the city government could change one thing to make Pacific Grove a better place to live now and in the future, what change would you like to see? This was asked in an open-ended way. What I mean by that is we didn't present them with that list of issues you see on the left side of the slide. They could just tell us in their own words or type into the online survey whatever issues or improvements that came to mind. We went back and looked at those verbatim responses and then grouped them into the categories you see here. So number one, top of the list, 11% can't think of anything, right? And a little further down, you see that about 4% said no changes are needed, everything is fine. So you had about 15% of voters who, when you kind of hand them a soapbox and say, step up on the soapbox, tell us one thing we can do to improve the quality of life in Pacific Grove. And they're sort of stuck for an answer, right? That is in some ways is ideal. The other thing you notice about this slide is there isn't any single specific issue that clocks more than 10% of responses. That's also generally a sign I have found of a city that's done a good job balancing your efforts, right? Because you haven't neglected an area, because if you neglect an area, I promise you it shows up on this slide. I was doing a survey presentation for a city last night where their top issue was mentioned by 47.8% of people. So nearly, half of every respondent, top of mind without prompting, would say the same thing. That tells you you've kind of got a burning problem in your community in that particular issue. So we don't see that here. Among the specific things we do see, about 10% mentioned they'd like to see more affordable housing. 7% mentioned enforcing traffic laws. 6% would like more sidewalks, and on down. So after that, last sort of the warm-up question was, we asked them, generally speaking, are they satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the city of Pacific Grove is doing to provide city services? Because we are asking them to comment on the city's performance overall, we're not sort of zeroing in on streets and roads or parks or public safety. This can be thought of as an overall performance rating for the city. And as you can see here, you had 71% of respondents say that they were satisfied with the city's overall performance. You've got about 21% who were satisfied, and the rest were unsure. I get to ask this question also for a lot of cities around the state, and I can tell you that the upper level at this point for top performance is high 80s, so about figure 87, 88%, and I see it in the 40s for some cities. Right. In fact, I had one earlier today that was around 43%. So, point in that is that if you're clocking 7 out of 10 respondents saying they're satisfied with your performance, you're doing a solid job. Okay, so after these warm-up questions, we get right down to business with what we call the initial ballot test. And the idea here is, before we get any deeper into this interview and start talking in more detail about how the funds from a successful measure might be able to be spent, or conveying arguments pro and con related to this proposal, we want to present to respondents a mock-up of what we think that 75-word ballot statement could look like and get their reaction. The initial ballot test is a really good gauge of where your voters are at on the natural with respect to this proposal, because they haven't seen anything about this measure beyond what you see here on the slide. So you can see here that this measure is structured as what we call a general sales tax. It is to fund general city services, such as the things you see here in the bullet. It's set at a rate of 3/8 cents, and it provides about $1 million annually for city services, and has a duration of 10 years. So that's the language we tested, and here are the results. So at that initial ballot test, we had 68% of likely November voters say that they would support this proposal. You had 24% who were opposed, the rest unsure. In the state of California, for a general sales tax measure to be approved, you need a simple majority, 50% plus 1. So we're sitting about 18 points north of the simple majority required for passage at the initial ballot test. So after the initial ballot test, we get into what we call the projects and services section of the interview. And the goal here is really twofold. One is we're now going to start to educate respondents more about what this proposal would accomplish. Up till this point, they only had that 75-word ballot statement. We can only use about half of those words to describe how the funds could be spent. Here, we get to unpack it into all of these potential uses, and in that way, they're getting a better idea about the proposal. The other thing it allows us to do is understand, of all the ways you're considering spending the proceeds of this measure, should it be successful, how do voters feel about each of those potential uses, and which of these are ultimately their priorities. As you look down this list, one of the things that stands out is everything on this list is popular, right? Even the lowest rated item here had better than 2/3 of respondents say that they would favor spending some of the money on that item. But as you look down the list, it is kind of striking that, and we see this often, normally we see that the response from the public sort of tends to fall into one of two camps, or there's a primary theme here. It's either public works or it's public safety, right? In your case, your residents are sort of leaning more into the public works side than the public safety side. All of the top rated items there are all kind of public works items of one stretch or of one stripe or another. Again, not that they don't care about public safety, they rate that really high as well. But again, it's usually the public safety stuff at the top, then Public Works, or the reverse. And in your case, it's the reverse. So if you as a council were to choose to place a measure on an upcoming ballot in November, there's going to be an election cycle, right? And during that election cycle, there will be a lot of discussion and debate in the community about this proposal. You'll have some folks who will step up and advocate on behalf of this measure to their neighbors and friends, talk about all the reasons why it's needed and why they should vote yes. You might also get some critics who step up, say, this is a terrible idea, shouldn't be doing it, and here's why. For this survey to be a reliable gauge of the feasibility of general sales tax measure, we need to simulate that discussion and debate in the space of the interview. So we have a good idea, not only where are your voters on the natural, which was that initial ballot test, but what happens to their support for this proposal once they've heard positive arguments, as well as once they've heard negative arguments. So you see here on this slide are the positive arguments we tested. The nature of the question is supporters of the measure say blank, you insert a positive argument. Do you think this is a very convincing, somewhat convincing, or not at all convincing reason to support the measure? As you can see here, a lot of these positive arguments get traction. The ones towards the top are usually a combination of either accountability arguments, you know, the idea that all the money stays local. If voters approve this, all the money stays local to fund essential services here in Pacific Grove. By law, it can't be taken away by the state or the county. Or talking about some of your infrastructure needs, right? The top one being about your storm drains being installed 50 years ago and are starting to fail. Measure provides the funding to help fix storm drains. And the third one down is just talks about the fact that you have a $21 million in unfunded infrastructure projects and maintenance needs that need to be completed over the next 10 years. And the longer you wait to deal with those things, the more expensive they become, right? So we've got some good positive arguments here that resonate. So at this point in the survey now, voters have heard more about your proposal than they did at that initial ballot test. We had a chance to talk in more detail about how the funds could be spent. We got to convey positive arguments. So we circle to what we call the interim ballot test. We present that same 75-word ballot statement, say, now that you've heard a bit more, where do you stand? As you can see here, support ticks up about a point. So we're sitting now at 69% support at the interim ballot test, which is a full 19 points north of the simple majority that's required for passage. And then we get to the negatives. And the idea behind the negatives is I want to pressure test voter support for your proposal by peppering respondents with a series of negative arguments, right? The kind of arguments you would expect to hear from a critic if they came out and opposed this measure. The reason for this is, you know, we always want to kind of be eyes wide open going into an election cycle. Should you get opposition? Should they be vocal and get their message out there? How might that impact voter support for your proposal? So you can see here, we tested a series of negative arguments. You've probably heard it that affordability is sort of the flavor of the election cycle this time, right? And we expect that it's going to be concerns about affordability and cost of living are going to be playing prominently in the 2026 election. So we created some negatives that were going right at that, right? Top one there, Pacific Grove is an expensive place to live, especially for young families, seniors, and those on fixed incomes. Passing a tax is going to make it even less affordable, right? So we're not shying away from the negatives. We're actually sharpening our knives here and trying to see how much support we can carve off your measure by hitting them with these various negative arguments. And you can see some of these get some traction, right? So the real question though is what happens afterwards, and that is here. So after the negatives, support cools down as you might expect. It goes down about 6 points from where we were at the interim ballot test, but it's instructive that even after opposition arguments, we're still landing at 63% support for this proposal. That is 13 points north of the simple majority required for passage. Okay, so a couple wrap-up slides here. So what does all this mean? I'm going to circle back first to that overarching question I mentioned at the outset as being the main motivator for why you do this research, which is to answer that basic question of, is it feasible? If you as a council were to choose to put this measure on the November ballot, does it have a reasonable chance of success? I think the answer based on this data is clearly yes, right? For all the reasons you see there under the positive signs, right? We saw that voters have an exceptionally high opinion of the quality of life in the city, and they value the services that they receive from the city, but they also do see some room for improvement. Those sentiments translated into really solid natural support for this proposal right out of the gates. With just the 75-word ballot statement, we had 68% of voters say they would support this measure. When we tested various projects and services that could be funded, voters those were popular with voters. We have positive arguments that resonate. And most importantly, at each point in the survey where we circled back and we presented that same 75-word ballot statement and said, now that you've heard a bit more, where do you stand? Each one of those ballot tests were well above the simple majority that's required for passage of a general tax. So when we see those pieces in place, those are the kind of pieces that we want to see in place for a measure to have a good shot at being successful on election day. Now, having said that, there are also a few challenges and unknowns that we should, keep in mind as you think about moving forward with a measure. On the challenges side, some of these come out of the survey itself. Some of these are sort of stepping back and thinking about what a 2026 election cycle is going to look like. So we did see that there was some receptiveness to those opposition arguments, right? They cooled us down about 6 points. We also know that we're going to be headed into what is yet another hyper-partisan election, right? And what we have found I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and the last 10 years are very different than the prior period of my career when it comes to the role that partisanship plays in driving how people behave on these types of measures. What we've tended to see is as you get closer to election day and the campaign drum beats get louder, the partisan appeals get stronger, you tend to see that we do see a little bit of a drifting apart between, say, Democrats and Republicans on lots of local issues. Tax measures can be one of them. And so we just want to keep that in mind. And then thirdly, there's all these things that I've labeled as unknowns, but with the un in parentheses. And the reason for that is, to some degree, we already know about all these things, right? We know about tariffs, we know about inflation, we know about concerns that people would have about the economy. What we don't know is what's going to happen in the next 6 months, right? It seems like there's a new shoe dropping every other week, right? Things are a little volatile in our economy as well as our political situation. And, these things can create headwinds for a measure later on, depending on what happens with the economy, depending on what happens with inflation. I mention all these challenges and unknowns not because they create insurmountable obstacles for your proposal. I think you have the kind of numbers here and a proposal that can withstand this, but that's important, right? Anytime you put a measure on the ballot, you want to put a measure up there that has the strength to withstand some headwinds should some of these other external factors go in a direction that, isn't favorable. You never want to put a measure on the ballot where you're throwing the Hail Mary, right? You're just crossing your fingers that you're going to get blue skies and tailwinds all the way to election day, because that just probably isn't going to happen. And so I think you have the kind of measure, again, that can withstand it. Your numbers are really solid, but it's important to keep these things in mind. Now, last slide here. So with that, I've got a few observations and recommendations. The first observation is it's important to keep in mind that a survey like this is a snapshot in time. It is not a crystal ball, right? It is not looking forward to election day saying you're going to get 68% on election day. It's telling us where your voters are today on the natural, right? It tells us how they react to the types of information we would expect them to encounter during the election cycle. But ultimately, what happens on election day isn't dictated by what your poll says today. It's dictated by everything that happens from this point forward. And so it's just a nice reminder that we need to make smart decisions about the measure that you put in front of voters so that it reflects their priorities and is cognizant of their concerns. And you got to put the work in terms of communications, and that really takes two paths. There's communications that you as a city and a public agency can and should do to sort of start a conversation with your community about what your needs are, what your infrastructure needs are, what your public safety needs are, and how this measure is that you're considering could be a solution to those. But you as a city cannot advocate, right? You can't tell folks to vote yes or vote no. You're simply providing information to help them come to a well-informed decision. It would also, separate from the city, private dollars, private time, would have to be an independent campaign that actually could advocate for this measure during the election cycle if you choose to place a measure on the ballot. So with that, I end my presentation. I certainly welcome questions from council if there are any.
Thank you, Dr. McClarty. We appreciate you making that very nice presentation. We're going to actually take it out to the public at this time and check on any public comment.
I do have a couple of hands online, Mayor.
Okay.
Carl Lindstrom.
I was just curious if the voter resolution that the voters have gathered enough signatures, that being on the ballot, if you've taken that into consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ada Langton Diamond.
Thank you. Mayor, city council members and staff, since my letter to council and mayor and staff sent on Sunday does not seem to be included in publishing in this agenda item for this meeting, I will read it so the public can easily hear it as my public comment. The city has already expended $53,150 for a scientific survey of a few resident voters. I was one of them, and I was not impressed. We have done better in-house surveys in previous years at much less expense. Does staff really think that spending $88,380 more to this consultant to try to cram a ballot measure down our throats is a fiscally prudent way to expend taxpayer dollars? Does council really think that spending another $88,380 is going to change any voter's mind? It just might backfire on you. The survey consultants came to their self-serving conclusion that Pacific Grove needs their services to pass a sales tax increase at the next general election. We already retain the services of a city attorney who should be capable of creating a ballot measure, although one of our previous city attorneys didn't manage the last tax increase measure very well and had to do another to correct his mistakes, a very costly delay. You can see from the survey the Pacific Grove voters are split, no surprise here. I would suggest to you that you terminate the contract with Props and Measures True North, save some money, and have staff continue forward with a ballot measure. It looks like you have majority support to pass from the scientific survey of $53,000 spending. And, you know, it's not going to pull this city out of debt, a sales tax measure. Only more prudent spending and living within our means, not creating more debt, will accomplish that goal. Give us voters some credit. We love our city. The pricing is broken down by phase, and the city can stop work at any time and not expend further taxpayer funds if that is desired. The first phase, we do not need to spend this $88,380 more to do a ballot measure. We have, or should have, the capacity to do this in-house. You have from this survey that's already spent.
Thank you. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else online?
No further hands, Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll close public comment, bring it back to the council for action. I'm going to make a few comments first. I really think listening to this presentation tonight was an excellent presentation, very well done. It was super scientific. It was a large majority in favor of the tax, and I think the way that they went about doing it was extremely was great. And obviously these people are experts. So for tonight, I want to keep the discussion focused because we have a lot of things on the agenda, and these are relatively long items. Recommendation number 2 is what we're looking at. We've done number 1. We've received a presentation, which was excellent, as I pointed out, and as we all know, based on watching it. And so tonight we're just looking at recommendation 2, authorize staff and the consultant team to proceed with phases 2 and 3 of the approved and reauthorized scope of work. And Mr. Mogensen, is that accurate what the staff's recommending?
That's accurate, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that would be assist the staff with communicating the city's fiscal needs to address resident expectations and basic infrastructure needs. Is that correct? As stated in the report?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so given that backdrop, council members, if you have questions of the presenter or comments, Councilmember Rao.
My question is for Mr. Mogensen. Can you just briefly go through the cost of phase 1, 2, and 3, just so that where we are and where we're going?
Councilmember Rao, yes, we can. So through phase 1 so far, I can report that we have spent $48,150 So that took us through tonight, what you've witnessed. The next phase, if you will, which would be a combination of 2 and 3, but it really is just one work product, would be another 4 months of the consulting fees plus potentially one mailer. And that would be a grand total of $36,730 should we continue on with this effort. We think that that's reasonable in terms of what it will take to get us to the end of June when you would vote whether or not to put it on the ballot. But I also note that overall, then the total cost for this effort would be $84,880, which is about $56,000 less than the original not to exceed contract.
That was 56,000 less.
Less, yes.
So I'm just going to just summarize that because I think there's a misunderstanding out in the public. We were looking at 140, now we're looking at 88, 84. Is that correct?
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. So just the original contract was always set up as a not to exceed kind of menu of options. As we've gone through this, we've kind of whittled that down, and this is what we believe is the final product, you know.
Great. Councilmember McDonald?
Thank you.
Did you, I'm sorry, you had your hand up, right?
I did, yes.
Okay, and then we'll go over to you. Sorry about that.
And just to confirm, the next stage is not just writing a ballot measure. The next stage is really, I kind of understand it as a transparency thing with the public. It's the opportunity for more education and input from the public so we better understand what their needs, what their goals are, what's important to them so that we can make sure that whatever ballot measure, should we decide to proceed, actually reflects the goals and needs of the community, correct?
I believe you characterized that correctly. So the next stage will be a series of meetings, presentations, talking to the community and helping them understand more of the issues that we're faced with in our long-term fiscal sustainability issues. And it's also, I think, sets the groundwork. It's a great investment for our future. So this conversation doesn't end with the ballot measure. This is bringing the community into the fold of what's happening behind the scenes and help them understand some of these long-term needs.
And for that reason, I appreciate it because for a small additional cost, it brings in the actual part where it brings in more of that overall community involvement because we're here to represent the community. We're looking at what are the things that we can do that best support the needs of our community, maybe further enhance how highly the citizens value our community. And so to me, that small initial additional investment for potentially raising a large amount of money to meet more of our needs is a good thing. And the one thing I think that's not clear in a lot of people's minds is we're asking for that 3/8 of a cent increase because that's what's kind of left on the table. And we're looking to pull that in now so we can keep that money local versus somebody else taking up that portion of tax, which then goes to an outside entity. Is that correct?
That'd be correct as well. It is potentially possible that somebody else, another agency within the county could try and absorb this money themselves. They could then be spent other places in the county. This would keep it here in Pacific Grove.
So I kind of see it as a way, what can we do to make sure we're meeting our citizens' needs and really making sure of that small extra amount that there's the capacity for really does help further what supports making our community continue to be great. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilmember Garfield.
Thank you. I have a question for Dr. McLarney. Will the participants that helped with the survey be communicated with to tell them what the final result is of the survey? Because that's 400 and some odd people in the city that might not have been tuned in, participated, and we thank them, but are we going to tell them what the end result was?
Yeah, so obviously there's a confidentiality issue where we don't release the names of people. Everyone who has, is given that guarantee of confidentiality when they're participating and on their answers. That said, what we typically see with cities, if they want to broadcast this, is, you can put this up on a website, you can make the data available as a city. And so for those who had taken the survey and were interested to follow up on the issue, it's there and available.
Okay. You've put your finger on one of our constant challenges is how do we speak to people in the community? And we find over and over again that something comes up that's slightly controversial and people have no idea what's been going on in the background. And they're surprised, shocked, appalled, elated, whatever, but it's not on their radar to spend time searching. So I really appreciate the plan to do more outreach. It will teach us better and engage the community on an issue that's very important to everybody. So I support this because it's an opportunity for us to be more revealing, more educational, more engaged with the community and vice versa. So learning from experts, it's a great opportunity for all of us, I think.
Yeah, I would just say that the survey itself, you want to think of this as the beginning of the conversation, not the end of the conversation, right? And that's sort of what the next phase is. It's just sort of now we're going to widen this beyond the 427 people that we spoke to as part of the survey. And now you get to engage the entire community.
Thank you very much. A lot of positives there. Councilmember Baduri.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Mr. McLaurin, for the presentation. Appreciate it. To me, this sounds like a logical next step for noting how the survey went, phases 2 and 3. Also noting the fact that the survey itself points out that there's a lot of infrastructure, or I would say public works related gaps that we need to address, which are all costly. And so we need to find a way to kind of keep the momentum going and the revenue coming in. So I'm supportive. I just had a question for Mr. McLaurin. Obviously, there's 427 voters, and I just wanted you to comment on, like, that's 427 voters, right? It's not just 427 folks. And then is it like, I think two things, related things. Is it like representative of the Pacific Grove demographics? So we have some unique demographics. So wanted to make sure that it was representative of that. And then just a comment from you, if you can, like, is that for a city like Pacific Grove and with your organization, generally is that where the mark is with respect to like a sample, like our voter base is about 10,000. So this looks like about 5%. Is that where you're leaning towards?
Sorry, I muted myself. I wrote a couple notes here in my response. So the survey itself is, as I mentioned at the outset, we are, because we're thinking about the potential feasibility of a revenue measure, we want to think about who are the voters that are going to decide the fate of that measure, right? It's not all voters, right? And there's voters who might participate in a presidential election that won't participate in a gubernatorial election, right? So we want to identify those voters that, based on when they registered to vote, what elections they've participated in since that point, and some other demographics, we anticipate are actually going to be casting ballots in November, because that's the group of people that would decide the fate of this measure should you as a council choose to put one on the ballot. So we identified all those likely voters. I use that stratified and clustered random sampling method. What that essentially does is breaks down your voter file by all the key demographics that we know tend to shape how voters behave on these tax measures. So we break it by age, gender, partisanship, and household party type and geography. Household party type's the big one, right, in today's world. And what that is if I know somebody's a Democrat, for example, it tells me something about how I might expect them to vote on this measure. Knowing that they live with another Democrat actually tells me a lot more, because what you find is that household dynamic really shapes how people behave. And so if you share the partisanship of the people you live with, when you talk politics, you tend to reinforce each other, right? So Democrats who live with other Democrats, they're your most liberal, right? Republicans who live with other Republicans, they are your most conservative. And if you live in a mixed household, God help you, what do? You fight about politics. And the act of fighting about politics actually moderates your behavior. You tend to be more in the middle. And so we pay a lot of attention to household party type as well as those demographics. We then build clusters that are multi-dimensional profiles. And so if I know that 5% of your likely November electorate are Democratic females who live with another Democrat, or between 40 and 50 years of age, live in a particular part of the city, I make sure that 5% of my clusters match that profile. Then we randomly select people into their clusters. And the reason why this really works well is because if I'm trying to reach somebody who's got a certain profile and I can't, right, we don't get to them, we can replace them with somebody who shares the same profile. And it's that profile that is so predictive of how people tend to behave on these tax measures that allows this approach, even in an age where we're not going to reach everybody and not everyone's going to agree to take this survey, and we only have 127 interviews, nevertheless, highly, highly predictive of what we would find if you went out and talked with all of your voters. In terms of your total likely voter sample size or universe, you have 8,520 individuals that we flagged as likely November voters. We have a sample here of 427. That gives you, as I mentioned, that margin of error of about plus or minus 4.6%. That is actually, as a percentage of the total electorate, higher than we would normally do in a community, because the neat thing about inferential statistics is it's not how many people you talk to, as it is how you choose the people that you talk to that allows you to extrapolate from this, what is a admittedly small sample size compared to the total universe of people, and still know within a certain margin of error, what they would think. And so I had set out here, I think I'd actually set out, and I think I'd set the goal at 250, because being a small and affluent community, sometimes those are the toughest communities to survey. And so we'd contracted to do 250. I walked back in the door with 427 because your community was willing to talk at a higher rate than I thought they would. So I think it's for your community size, it's great. It's also worth noting that population size doesn't really matter much in terms of your margins of error. I could take 400 interviews and interview in the city of San Jose, which has 1 million people, right? And have a margin of error that was pretty close to what we're seeing here in Pacific Grove with the same sample size. So population size doesn't matter so much. It's your sample size plus the way in which you pull them in a random manner. That was probably a longer answer than you wanted, but I apologize.
No, it was actually a great answer, and thank you for sharing the science behind what is going on with the demographic, the sampling, also the family dynamics. So appreciate it, and I'm supportive of this. Thank you.
It's, I ditto what everybody else said, but I think this is common sense that we're going to do the best for Pacific Grove. And I'm ready to make a motion to authorize the staff and the consultant team to proceed with phases 2 and 3 of the previous approved and reauthorized scope of work.
Do I have a second? All right, we have a motion by Emilio, a second by Garfield. We'll take a roll call vote. Unless there's any further discussion.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Mayor Pro Tem Emilio, Councilmember Garfield,
Aye.
Councilmembers Ryle. Aye. Aduri,
Aye.
McDonald,
Aye.
Mayor Smith.
Aye.
Motion carries 601 with Councilmember Watkins absent.
Thank you, Dr. McClarney. We appreciate the report. Great job. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great night.
All right, we're going to go back to item 11A. This is the ordinance to amend section 16.52.020 speed zones of the Pacific Grove Municipal Code. And I'll recognize our Public Works Director, Daniel Go.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the City Council, I have a quick presentation. Let me see. So it seems to be stuck. Okay. Okay, very good. Tonight I'm here to present the speed zones for the city of Pacific Grove. A little bit of history here. Okay, speed surveys are required to be updated every 7 years, but they can be extended to 10 years. I'm going to give you this background because this is something we don't see or do very often. So they can be extended to 10 years. We have extended our current speed zones till March of this current year. We're actually in year 10 of our current zones. The evaluation is completed based on engineering and traffic surveys. Speed limits can be adjusted to the nearest 5 mile per hour interval of the 85th percentile speed. So we evaluate speeds on the prescribed road segments, and then we can adjust 5 miles an hour one way or the other. The surveys consider road alignments, pavement widths, and physical characteristics of the roadways. The city must have these speed zones certifications on file with the traffic courts to validate the use of radar by the police department. Hence why we're doing them. So what are our major changes today versus the code that you're looking at? So what we would like to do is we're going to make some changes in the code per your guidance. We would like to adjust 17-mile drive from Sunset Highway 68 to Lighthouse from 30 miles an hour to 25. We would like to adjust Jewel Avenue from Pacific to 17-mile drive from 30 miles an hour to 25 miles per hour. Patterson Lane from Funston to David, 30 to 25. Forest Avenue from Laurel to Lighthouse. So right here to Lighthouse, 25 to 15. And then we're combining numerous roadway segments just so there's consistency when the police department is trying to enforce the radar. And that those combinations are noted in the staff report. So what are the next steps? I took this to the Traffic Commission at the February meeting, and they agreed with the recommendations. I'm bringing it forward today to City Council. It needs 2 reads of the ordinance to be approved. So your second read of the ordinance would be the 1st of April. Then we have 30 days and we'll send it to the courts. In the meantime, we'll send that to the courts and get that all processed. And then Public Works will go through, we'll update the signs and make any other changes to the road markings. Minimal expense to do that, probably less than $5,000. All can be achieved within our operation budgets. So again, the recommendation today is to introduce and hold a first reading of the ordinance to amend section 16.52.020, which specify the speed zones of our municipal code. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Go. So right now, can we go out to the public and see if there's anyone wanting to comment on this? Okay, come on up. Yeah, you've been waiting here. How you doing? All right. Anyone online, Tanner?
I do not see any hands online.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Jean Haskell and I've lived here since 2014. And I love living here, but I have to tell you, I try to walk early in the morning on Lighthouse. People are going 40 to 45 miles an hour at 6 to 7 to 8 a.m. in the morning. And so the idea to change the speeds anywhere lower seems somewhat ludicrous because we don't enforce the current speed limits. So I'm not really addressing the motion. I'm just telling you, it's not working. I mean, and I know a lot of people who walk their dogs in those times. And I mean, and it's not tourists. It's people in pickup trucks and sedans, and they are speeding at ridiculous rates in the morning. And I don't blame our police. I know they're doing the best they can. And I know we have, you know, they're trying, but you can make all the changes in the world, but if you don't enforce existing laws, what are you teaching the residents of the community? Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Sandra?
No hands raised online.
All right, we'll go ahead and close public comment. I'm going to come back to Councilmember Rao. I do have one, just want to say one thing about this. You know, we get a lot of speed complaints in our emails, so I think this is probably a step in the right direction. We're not getting people saying we need to speed up. So, you know, the surveys are probably right, and so I'm going to be supportive of the item tonight. Go ahead, Councilmember Rao.
Yeah, I have one question and concern. Number 4, Central Avenue, Early Avenue to Forest Avenue, that combined corridor. And I understand combining corridors when it's like for like on a particular traffic pattern or speed. But the corridor on Central from Early to 2nd is not the same kind of street as it is from 3rd Street to Forest. And when you look at a median lane in the middle where people are double parking so that they can deliver packages, you look at the 4 different animal service businesses, you look at the people coming to and from the aquarium, walking to First Awakenings, all of those things. I mean, in my mind, I think you look at this and say that you should maintain Early to 2nd or 3rd at 15 miles an hour and then have it go to 25 miles an hour to Forest. So I have a real concern about the Central Avenue speed limit and the combining of the corridors. And I'd like to know, Mr. Go, I mean, what was the conversation around that? And I mean, is there an opportunity to take another look at this?
Councilmember Rao, there's always an opportunity to take a look at it. The previous speed limits that were set in 2006 had Central Avenue at 25 miles an hour, and the current speed has Central Avenue at 25 miles an hour. We did the evaluations back in 2006 and also recently, and Central Avenue is not warded at 15 miles an hour, unfortunately. We've got average speeds of 28 and 29 miles an hour through the whole corridor, and we can't adjust. We could adjust, but then that roadway is not going to be enforceable. If we were to take it to 15, we can, here's how it works. So we have 28 and 29 miles an hour. You can adjust it to, what you do is you take it to your next closest 5 mile an hour increment. So that would then set Central Avenue at 30 miles an hour. But then you can adjust one way or the other based on conditions and what you're experiencing. So then we know that we want to adjust Central Avenue down to 25 miles an hour. We can't adjust it to 15 and have it be enforceable. That would be considered a speed trap, right? So then if you were to write a ticket at that 15 miles an hour, it wouldn't be upheld in the court of law. So with that being said, we also need to think of having that like consistent speed going from Lighthouse Avenue and Monterey into Pacific Grove. If that's 25 miles an hour and we drop down to 15 and we don't have the documentation to support that 15 mile an hours, it's just thrown out in courts. So yes, I understand the concern with the speeding, but we have to base our decisions on setting speed limits on engineering and observations.
So I understand all of that. I'm just saying that the methodology is a little, from the person that's on the outside looking in or online looking this way, it seems a little ludicrous, but I get it. But I'm just saying that, I mean, it doesn't take an engineering degree to look at that Central Avenue corridor and know that it's dangerous. It's dangerous for pedestrians. It's dangerous for people walking their dogs. And I just want to be on record as saying, I think it's problematic and I'll support it because of that. But I think that, that's another area where we need to ramp up some kind of enforcement, whether it's putting up, solar powered, signs that, highlight the speed limit or, additional painting or whatever it takes. But there's a real concern as you're driving down that. I won't go past 15 just because I think it's super dangerous. So anyway, I'm sorry for the people behind me on Central Avenue. I apologize for not driving the speed limit, and I don't want a ticket for going too slow.
That's taken, so we're bounded by laws, state laws and things like that. Unfortunately, we're going to keep us from changing that particular area. Councilmember Garfield?
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate the sort of smoothing that you've done with some of these where as people are driving along, they don't have to guess what the speed limit is if the conditions are the same, if the roadway is the same, you're combining corridors. So it's predictable for those driving. As an aside question on, not my car, but my husband's car, the speed limit for where we are shows up on his CarPlay. How does that happen? I know it's magic, but what makes it possible? Because the more cars we have like that, the better people will be informed as they drive along. Is it magic or is there something else?
I do not know how to answer that question.
Okay.
I really don't. I think that maybe it's all done by GPS and but I would not go by the speed limits that are noted in your cars because that sometimes they are incorrect. I've noticed that on my vehicles, and so
Oh, so
my
noted. Okay.
observation.
But my real question is, um, enforcement. So as Ms. Haskell pointed out, we can tell anybody what they can be on their car, on their CarPlay. It can be on a sign. But if we're getting people not obeying it and we're not enforcing it, all we're doing is saying it doesn't matter. So can you tell us where we stand with the signs that say your speed is?
When the new fiscal budget rolls around in July, we anticipate purchasing a few of those through the Public Works operations budgets. And then we'll let the Traffic Commission decide where they would want to place them. And I have heard the city council today maybe requesting one on Central Avenue as we enter town. So that could be a very great location.
And those are movable, right? So you can have it in one place for a while and then move it to another place?
No, we were anticipating getting ones that were permanently affixed into some locations where the police department already has a few that are movable that they move around through town.
Where are those?
I've been seeing one on Sunset Avenue by the church for the last week.
Okay. And they come on a trailer, you haul the trailer in, you can put it someplace?
That's correct. And the police department moves those periodically throughout town based on their observations.
And perhaps they've heard a couple spots they might want to highlight tonight. Okay, thank you. I think this is we do this every 10 years. We learn things, we make accommodations, but we really need to educate people and then enforce. So.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and move recommendations 1 and 2, but I'll have discussion comments. Mayor Pro Tem Amelia, do I have a second to that motion?
Well, I'll second that motion, but I do want to say that I'm familiar with the CDC code regarding engineering traffic survey. I'm very familiar with that. So it hasn't changed for quite a few years. But I'll second that motion there.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, take a roll call vote.
Thank you. Mayor Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Amelia,
Yes.
Garsfield,
Aye.
McDonald. Aye. Kaduri
Aye.
and Rao.
Aye.
Motion carries 601. Councilmember Walking Stick absent.
Thank you very much, Mr. Go. Appreciate the work. Glad that we're taking some action here, and obviously enforcement is going to be critical to the success of this endeavor. So we'll go ahead and go on to item 12B, ownership analysis and compliance for cannabis business license applications. And my colleague, Councilmember Perduri, will present from the Zoom platform.
Yes, thank you. Thank you all. And sorry for not being there in person for my own item. Thank you all. I don't have a presentation per se, but I just want to at least reiterate a couple of things, which is that we're somewhat in a pivotal moment for the cannabis licensing process. And this agenda item is to just ensure that the process is fair and legally sound. So as the agenda item stated, we received 10 applications. They were for just two of the locations. 2 locations had 10 applications essentially. And so there's a concentration, so to speak, at one location, which is the 1157 Forest Avenue. So really the intent of this agenda item is to make sure we take a closer look at who's actually behind the submissions. And so the agenda item states that we proceed with a formal documented ownership analysis before we actually conduct the lottery. So the whole reason for the lottery I would say, I've been through the process. The whole reason for the lottery to exist is to really make this competitive and not just make it a lottery by volume. So I just want to make sure that everything is sound. And the other side of me is also to just ensure the fact that we want to, if any problems are discovered, we rather correct them now rather than doing it later, which could be more disruptive, so to speak. And the intent of this agenda item is to also return the findings as stated with some scope for the staff to review by the end of April, which will give us all of us, like some confidence on how to move forward with this. So, and therefore, the third action of this item is really to pause the lottery so that we complete the other two action items in order for us to make a more informed, I would say, vote towards the lottery process. So that's my little spiel there, but happy to take any questions.
I'm going to ask you one clarifying question as to the recommendation number 2. It says the direct staff to return to council with written findings and recommendations. What is the scope of those findings and recommendations that you would like council to return or staff to return with?
So I think it's part of the agenda item, right? So it's the scope would be the intent, really the basis for that is to find out whether any of the applications share common ownership or not. And so if when I say direct staff to return to council with written findings and recommendations, my intent is to adhere to the points which are described in the agenda item, which are in the bulleted below. And those are what came to me as what we can do to make a decision. But if staff has other kind of items to add to that analysis, I'm open to that too. And then finally, I just wanted to mention that my understanding, and this may be off, but my understanding is we can also have the staff request the Department of Cannabis to review the process to see whether common ownership or items like this matter or not. So if that is feasible and possible, I would like to suggest the staff undertake that action too.
Okay, so I'm just going to summarize. I think what you're saying with number 2 is written findings and recommendations, basically to conduct a formal ownership and control analysis, as you put in number 1, and also to take a look at your bullet points there too, as potentially good to that.
Correct.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much. Does that conclude your report?
Yes.
All right, and we'll go ahead and take it out to the public.
Thank you, Mayor. Carl Lindstrom, you have the floor.
As Mr. Berduri correctly states.
Mr. Lindstrom, I believe you spoke to this item previously.
Not directly, I mean, in generally, but not directly to the ownership issue, which is what I'm just trying to speak to.
I believe part of your comments did actually direct, but we'll look to the city attorney. What would be your recommendation?
The prior comments were more broadly to the whole licensing scheme, although it did include ownership, points regarding that. It's up to your honor whether or not you view that as having spoken to this. But because it is a new public comment period, I think the safer bet is just to allow.
Okay, we'll go ahead and allow you, Mr. Lindstrom. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I just wanted to go back to the issue under 23.92.020 under the relationship that city staff should have never stated that there is not an issue in regards to the ordinance because there's a conflict specifically stated under Medical Cannabis and Adult Use Regulation Safety Act, which really there needs to be some sort of review of ownership standards, which there hasn't been. And I really want to go back to the EIN issue because obviously 7 of the organizations, if they had been background checked, they'd know they don't have an EIN. So thank you for your time. And that should have been part of the basic background information that the cannabis consultant had looked into in basic discovery to do due diligence. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And Lawrence and Dimer.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Well, you know that I have never been impressed with HDL, but this one is, I see this, and mind you, I support Berduri's stuff here, but I see it as a major CYA for the city to make absolutely sure about litigation and fairness, because obviously this is not fair as far as stacking permits. So this is a very interesting process, but yeah, I think it's one that's needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
No further hands are raised.
Okay, go ahead and bring it back to the council. Recognize Councilmember Rao.
Um, you know, the only thing that I've heard from the community on the cannabis piece, from people that have spoken to me, is the frustration of why this takes so long. They've been waiting for years for this to get up and running. And it's the number one issue when somebody brings cannabis up to me. It has withstood multiple legal reviews from multiple different legal firms. We're down the road on this process, and I think the time to bring this up was, probably whoever wrote the original ordinance should have anticipated some of these issues coming up. But I'm thinking about the fiscal issues, the refunds of all of the money that are going to have to go back. I'm thinking about the more delays. And, before there's even, somebody's complaining about the rules of the game before we even draw the ticket. So, if the one wins and there's a 1 out of 10 chance that you could, this would all just be for naught. So, did we speak with Mr. Mogensen, did we speak with the State Board of Cannabis?
Councilmember Rao, I believe we talked a little bit about this at the previous council meeting, that we were contacted by an attorney. The city attorney was contacted, and maybe I'll let him speak to it, so.
Yeah, we were contacted by general counsel for the State Department that regulates cannabis. The nature of the call was inquiry into the lottery system that happened. Once we explained what happened, the hour-long Zoom meeting lasted about 10 minutes, and that was that.
And the State Board did not have a concern. Is that my understanding?
That's correct.
So, I think this sounds a little bit kind of like sour grapes. It's like one of those don't hate the player, hate the game kind of situations. So, from my perspective, I think this is adding more time, more money back. And we're going to end up probably back right where we started. So I'm in favor of any more delays for this, and I'll be voting no.
Councilmember Garfield, did you have your hand up or not?
To
Okay.
have a thought. So this has been a very confusing issue for me. And I wonder if we can get some clarity on what is actually being asserted about this. And my belief is, my understanding is that the definition of owner is clearly defined, that we are following that. I think, as far as I can tell, there are existing use permits, existing enforcement that are referenced in the ordinance that I looked at. And my biggest question is, if we change the definition of ownership to be more restrictive and have an additional requirement for those who applied, are we changing the terms of the application process to the point where we're just bait and switch, which would lead us to have, I think, more vulnerability to lawsuits that we're adding at the last minute a new consideration or a new requirement. That concerns me, that if you say, oh, we're getting to the lottery period, but now we're going to change this, and so 7 of you can't apply because you don't fit some new requirement, we give their money back. Well, do we have the money to give back to them? What are the consequences for that? What are the legal ramifications of changing this at the last minute? And so if I'm going to frame this as a question for our city attorney, it would be, if we change requirements at the last minute, what are the legal consequences?
Doing so would subject the city to a challenge that the process, that the applicants, what you said is that the rules changed at the last minute. Generally, less risk would be associated with either, if that was the case, either starting anew. There would be less risk to the city. So in other words, if you wanted a change in definition, the less risky option would be to start at the beginning rather than change the definition after the applications are in and midstream.
Thank you.
Thank you for the explanation, Councilmember McDonald. She had her hand up first.
Thank you, Mayor. And I sort of understand this concern a little bit differently. So the way I see it is not that we're asking to change the definition of ownership, but they're really asking to clarify the definition of ownership. So because we're sort of adopting or did adopt the same definition of ownership that the state board did, which does say, is there any management oversight, which implies a sort of connection. That's the thing that I don't feel has been fully addressed. Yes, they are multiple different applications. And yes, they may have a separate ownership listed, but because in our ordinance, we did say and use that definition, it does imply that if they have a common oversight, multiple of them, then that should potentially constitute ownership. So I see this item as being more about trying to really define, are we following our own definition of ownership as it was put forward? Because that hasn't fully been addressed. One of the callers mentioned that multiple ones may actually not have separate EINs. If that is part of what constitutes ownership, then I think that's really important for us to know before we proceed, because we're only asking in this item for a very slight extension of less than a month, probably. If we have this information back by the 30th, it could easily be heard have the drawing in April. April instead of March. So, my brain is like mixing up the dates, but so we would only delay instead of April 30th to potentially mid-May. So we're talking about maybe 2 extra weeks. And I think that as stewards of what the community wants, what I'm hearing from people is the process doesn't seem fair anymore. They thought we would be vetting the people who come in. We would have distinct entities applying. And I'm hearing that people don't feel that's what's happened here, and they feel that it's not a fair process. So I see this as being something prudent, just to take an extra couple of weeks to make sure that we are ensuring that it meets the definition to protect us from challenges later, and so that the public feels that we've taken the time to make sure it's a fair process. So for that reason, I support the recommendations in the agenda item.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Malone, then Councilmember Rao. You're a little close to the mic.
Okay, I was going to say, this process of the cannabis has been going on for several years. It started off with the election in my first term as a city council. In the city agreed at 64%, I believe it was, to have cannabis in the city of Pacific Grove. So this has been several years. I agree with Council Member Lori here. I agree with you what you've said. I truly believe we need to, because I have heard different, that we need to take a pause by this. In fact, I won't mention any names, but I even got some Texas city that other people have asked me about this. And I think to make it clear and transparent, we should put a pause on this. I mean, we've waited for so long now. I agree with Council Member Baduri's recommendation. That's where I'm at.
Thank you, Councilmember Rao.
Mr. Mogensen, can you get this done in a month? You've got basically 5 weeks to be back by, and that's not even true, because it's going to be longer than that, because we don't have a council meeting after the 15th. So
Councilmember Rao, I think, yeah, if we were to deliver by the end of April, it actually would be March, I think it was 6th or something. May, I'm sorry. In terms of your question about could we deliver this, I'm going to look at some of my colleagues and I believe this is not that large of an exercise. We've issued memos on the same topic a couple of times now, so it's more probably of charting it differently or showing a different picture. But I don't think the analysis is going to be very different.
Councilman Garfield.
Yeah, thank you. So just following the sequence of events, in May, we hear back that the ownership definition keeps all the same people in it. They're more like franchises than shared ownership. And so they can all go ahead with their application, and we just have made the delay. My concern is when we've changed the ownership definition, which disqualifies some of the people who previously have been qualified by our processes. And I don't know if there are any of those. I don't know how many of them there might be, but that is my concern. And it does seem like we're instigating a change of rules that will impact some of these applicants, and I think they'll have something to say about it.
Thank you. Would anyone like to make a motion relating to the recommendations? Mayor Pro Tem Emilio?
Yeah, I'll go
Would
ahead and make,
you make the motion as to recommend, move all 3, 1, 2, and 3?
yes, I would go ahead and make a motion to recommend number 1, 2, and 3.
Oh, the recommended actions?
Yes.
Thank you. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right. We have a motion by Emilio and the recommendations. We have a second by Councilmember Paduri, proponent. Any further discussion? Before we take the roll call vote, I'll just state just kind of my thoughts. I think this is a close call for me too, but like it was for everyone else. I'm not as so concerned about the legal elements because we're not making any real changes yet until perhaps we do change the definition or something like that down the line, then that could be a problem or whatever. And at that point, if we got that far into it, we'd probably just decide to start over again. But I don't want to say that because I don't want it to go out. I don't want it to be dragged out either. I've been involved with this for quite a while now. And, but I'm kind of where the Mayor Pro Tem is as far as we've already taken all this time. Let's uncover that other rock and look underneath it and then move from there. So with that, go ahead and take a roll call vote. Sandra.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Emilio?
Aye.
Councilmember Paduri?
Aye.
Councilmembers McDonald?
Aye.
Rao? And Mayor Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Mayor, to confirm, that's the first meeting in May in which we would be back to you?
The motion was just that the findings and recs would be
No later.
in no later than end of April.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's all that we did. Does that clarify your question? All right.
Yeah. Did you have something, Mr. Morganson?
We've already taken the vote, so yeah,
Okay.
we're gonna move on. Okay, we're gonna take a break. It's 7:50 p.m. We're gonna take a break before we get to the next part of the agenda. And let's come back at 8:05.
You don't. You don't have my.
Recording stopped.
Some people don't really want to talk to me about it. You can crazy ones.
Yeah.
Recording in progress.
Item 13A, this is an award of agreement regarding sewer infrastructure, 17 Mile Drive, CIP number 1. And I will recognize again our Public Works Director, Deputy City Manager Daniel Go.
Thank you, Your Honor, members of the City Council. This is a big one I'm going to present to you guys tonight. 17 Mile Drive Sewer Rehabilitation Project. I have just a brief presentation. I can figure out how to put sewer in, but not do a PowerPoint, trust me. I don't know why it doesn't want to scroll. I don't think she's going to be able to help either. There you go. Okay. All right. Okay. Our sewer system, just a little bit of background, 58 miles of sewer pipeline. We have 904 manholes. We serve residential and business wastewater. So all the wastewater from your house, our businesses go into our system. They're conveyed to 9 pump stations, 7 owned by the city, 2 owned by Monterey One Water. Ultimately, they go through the city of Monterey, Seaside, so on and so forth, go to Monterey One Water in Marina. All of our infrastructure is funded by the Sewer Enterprise Fund. So what is this project? This project was initiated in fiscal year 23-24. And what it was initiated and we retained the Wallace Group, an engineering firm out of San Luis Obispo, who has been instrumental in quite a few of our sewer infrastructure projects, our bigger projects like this, and some storm drain projects. The focus of this project is 17 Mile Drive in Pebble Beach. We have infrastructure that runs through Pebble Beach. When Del Monte Park used to be part of the county, also Pebble Beach was part of the county, all of that sewer infrastructure went from the bottom of David Avenue through Pebble Beach, ultimately down through 17 Mile Drive. So this project located in Pebble Beach and Spanish Bay Golf Course. They built the golf course right over the top of our infrastructure in 1987. So what is the project? Replaces 2,050 feet of sewer line via more traditional methods, open trench technology and directional drilling. But we're doing a new thing here with this one, micro tunneling, because it's 30 feet deep, and I'll show you a map in a little bit. And this is a technology that is geared towards these very deep drillings. We're also putting in 12 new manholes. We're reconstructing 4 manholes, all access points. And then, since we're in Pebble Beach, they're going to make us redo their roadways. 3,830 square feet of road rehabilitation on 17 Mile Drive, basically from Mahela, which is right there by Spanish Bay's entrance, to where kind of like the gate, just short of the gate on 17 Mile Drive. And then we're going to have to do some slurry seal. So I know this is kind of fuzzy, but here's the project. The green, let me see if the cursor shows up. It does. So this section right here is open trench. Then where you see a purple is so that's Mahela. And then the purple is the directional drilling because it's going through like a wetland there. So we can't open up any grounds through that area. So we're doing the drilling, the directional drilling right there. Then we're going into 17 Mile Drive. Here's the entrance to Spanish Bay right here. 17 Mile Drive, this is all open trench. The yellow is our current existing sewer system. So it has a 90 right here at a manhole and goes into Spanish Bay, the 12th fairway. Was always like this, and they built the golf course over the top of our infrastructure. As you can see, the yellow goes here and that big blue circle is a manhole that is exposed in front of 12 green of Spanish Bay in the Magella Slough. Yes, that line is 100% inaccessible. We cannot maintain it. Hence why we're doing this project. It's definitely a liability. For 40 years, it's been here underneath the golf course. Yes, we get in there and we maintain it the best we can. So you could see that where the manhole is, and then that yellow line goes into the public works yard. I have manholes in the public works yard and I can try to run that line up, but we're only so successful at it. So we're gonna abandon what you see in the yellow in place, remove the manhole out of the creek, do a concrete slurry on the infrastructure that's under the 12th fairway of Spanish Bay and abandon it in place. Obviously, we've been working for a year and a half with Pebble Beach. Spanish Bay Golf Course is closing, if not like this week, next week for 1 year because they're doing a renovation. So we've been timing this all to be right in line with their schedule and what they're doing. So we're going to abandon all that infrastructure that's in place in Spanish Bay. What you're seeing on the red here is the micro tunneling. We still have to keep all of this gravity fed. So if you know, when you go into Pebble Beach from the 17-mile drive gate, you're going kind of downhill. So if you're going the opposite direction, you're going uphill. This sewer line is going to be 30 feet deep to get our velocities, our flows that we need to have to keep that gravity sewer line moving. We're going to have manholes here that are 30 plus feet deep that we can use then to do our cleanings, but everything's going to be accessible. We're going to then run it behind the 12th green at Spanish Bay and then drop it into the public works yard. Once we get to the public works yard, we have our main sewer line that runs through the middle of the public works yard. That's all going to be replaced and then tied into infrastructure that's on Sunset Highway 68. And from there, it goes down Grove Acre, down to Silmar, ultimately to the Coral Street Pump Station, and away it goes. That's the project in a nutshell. So we released an RFP in January of 2026. We received 3 bids. This is a big project. KJ Woods was the low bidder. They're a very big construction company that's based out of San Francisco that specializes in this type of work. And we've qualified them as the lowest responsible bidder. And next steps will be to execute a contract. We'll hold a pre-construction meeting that would include the city, the Wallace Group, because the Wallace Group back in 2023, when we approved the agreement to do this engineering, they're also going to be doing the construction management of this project. It's a big one. So we want boots on the ground, observing daily right here. They'll finalize a construction schedule. We'll send that to any residents that are affected in Pebble Beach, because there will be some affected in Pebble Beach, and then we'll begin construction. It's a very tight timeline on this because they're trying to get Spanish Bay open by April 2027 because they have US Open in June of 2027. So we got to get this thing done. This is our tight window, and it's not like we could have started earlier because Spanish Bay Golf Course is open, right? And then we've got all of their events. We've got Car Week, we've got the AT&T, their Callaway event, all of these weeks where we can't work also that have been noted. So that's it. Thank you. I'm open for questions.
All right, great job. No, we appreciate the item very much. Public comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I do not see any hands raised online.
Thank you. All right, there's, for the record, only 2 members of the public in chambers, and I believe they're here for the next item. So we'll go ahead and close public comment. Bring it back to council for action. Obviously, this is a great opportunity. We have our sewer fund, and this is what we were This is what we're here for. So this is what we always talk about, and we're going to do it. So Councilmember Paduri online.
Yes, thank you. What I got, Dan, from all of this is we need to increase our handicap on the infrastructure. But the one thing question I had was the budget, right? Because this is a large amount. Is that going to be spread over years? How do we account for this and we're going to award the RFP, but that's a large number. Is it all going to be accounted in this fiscal year? How is that planned to be done?
Councilmember Paduri, we've been saving for this project. We haven't done a big sewer project. For a few years, we've done some smaller phase projects that have equated, a few $100,000 here or there, or some sewer spot repairs associated with our street rehab projects. Knowing this larger project was coming with the 2-year budget that we approved last July, we allocated funding for this project. We allocated a larger majority of the funding into next fiscal year 26, 27. But with your mid-year budget adjustment, where you just approved the second read today, we shifted quite a bit of that into this fiscal year. So we're able to get started now and then carry that funding into the next fiscal year. I think we have over $7.7 million allocated for just the construction of this project. And the money's already been allocated for the Wallace Group with their extra engineering that will be needed and their construction management.
So in other words, it's already budgeted for along with the contingency through 2027, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all that I need.
Thank you, Councilmember Rao.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know that Pebble's going to be closed for 13, 14 months, whatever that took. How long is our portion going to take?
We're anticipating it taking the 3 to 4, 5 months. And we have a tight window because they're doing their golf course work in phases. So they're going to come in and do like the 12th hole area, I think in phase 2. So that's when we got to get in there and do that work and remove our infrastructure. We have to have our new line in place and the old line will still be active and working. So one of the first things we do is the micro tunneling and get that in place. So then when we go and do all our open trench, we just connect right to that and then we can go in and abandon that existing line that's underneath Spanish Bay.
Okay. Will there be any service disruption to our residents? And if so, how will they be notified and how long will it be?
No service disruption whatsoever to our residents. If we have to do any bypass pumping, it would just be temporary and there would be no disruption whatsoever.
Thank you. And I appreciate you doing this while Pebble is closed and the planning that's gone into this. I think it's perfect. We always you and I talk about dig once. And I think this is a great, sewer is not sexy, but boy, people lose their bananas when it doesn't work. So I'm all in and I thank you guys for the work that it's taken for the last year and a half to get this done.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Mr. Go, you mentioned, is Pebble Beach going to contribute any dollars?
No.
Okay.
It's not their infrastructure.
Okay.
So
I had to ask that question. Spanish Bay, obviously is one of my routes. Not that I live in Spanish Bay, but I don't. But they are remodeling some of their rooms and stuff. So I'm all for this. Like Council Member Rao said, if the sewer gets backed up, look out. So I'm all for this.
Thanks. Yeah. Councilmember Garfield.
Thank you. This is an example of precision planning. I think you've brought the team together and it's incisive. You've got it planned down to the wire. Very complicated project. I just want to point out that this is exactly what the survey we heard about later says we should be doing with our time and money. So, yay. fully support this.
In fact, we did hear about that tonight. I agree. Would you like to comment? Okay, I'll make a motion, recommendation 1. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on recommendation 1. And again, thank you so much for the planning and all the thought that went into this. And I know it's on all of our campaign slogans that we're supporting streets and sidewalks and sewers. So that's the way to, this is great work. I'll take a roll call vote now.
Thank you, sir. Mayor Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Pro Tem Emilio,
Aye.
Council Members Garfield, McDonald. Aye. Kaduri
Aye.
and Rao.
Aye.
Motion carries 601. Councilmember Walking Stick absent.
Thank you so much. Very important item, this important work, and I'm glad that we're doing it. And at this point, I think we're down to our final item tonight, which is we're going to have a presentation by Robin McCray, the CEO of Community Human Services and Gathering for Women. So I'll invite Ms. McCray to come up to the podium to give her presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. I'm Robin McCray. I'm the CEO of Community Human Services. And joining me tonight is Stacy Alzebler Perkins. I'll let Stacy introduce herself.
I'm the Executive Director of Gathering for Women Monterey. Glad to be here with you.
This is a little easier for us to do it this way. I hope this is okay. But Community Human Services and Gathering for Women partner to operate one of the shelters that we're going to talk to you about, and that's Casa de Noche Buena. So we're here to talk about Casa de Noche Buena and Schumann Hart House tonight, because we are facing a fiscal cliff as local people in the homeless shelter or the homeless services arena are calling it. It's recognized by the Board of Supervisors in several cities throughout the continuum of care, the Monterey and San Benito counties continuum of care. And we just want to make you aware, we're not here to ask for money tonight. We're here to ask you to put on your thinking caps, hear what our problems are, help us come up with some creative solutions, and also understand that if we're unable to sustain the shelters, and we have other programs as well that are facing the same, but the biggest impact that the cities probably will feel is the closure of the shelters. So anyway, that's why we're here tonight. And Stacy, do you want to take it away?
So I'm sure you're all aware that both Casa de Noche Buena and Schumann Hart House are shelters for single women and families with children. Each one serves 35 beds approximately, and a typical stay is about 6 months, can be longer or shorter depending on their situation. Annually, each shelter serves 25 women and about 15 families. And approximately 3 members per family, can be larger or smaller depending on the children. The program goal is stabilizing them and getting them to transition to permanent housing and improve their income, their self-sufficiency and well-being. There's also wraparound supports, basic needs. They've got showers, they've got meals, they've got laundry, clothing, computer access. There are also housing focused support, so they can see their case manager and their housing navigator and find new ways to get back into housing. And there may be some rapid rehousing funding for them. And also stability in case they have mental illness, they have any kind of addiction, if they need employment services or some other financial planning stability, finding that income that will keep them in the housing once they get it.
So we're very proud of our housing outcomes. There's a statewide benchmark that shows it's Cal ISIC from 23-24, that 23% statewide exit to permanent housing. For Casa de Noche Buena, which we co-operate, our numbers are 50% to permanent housing and another 25% to temporary housing. And we count temporary housing because it's a win. It's a win in progress. We have some slow winners sometimes. They do everything they've been asked to do, and they've got their housing voucher, and they're just looking for a landlord that will accept their voucher. And then there are complications with that, including finding tenants, which we also work to find suitable tenants and to encourage tenants to accept vouchers. At Schumann Hart House, which we operate independently, 57% moved to permanent housing and another 17% to temporary. But if you add the numbers for both shelters, it's 75% to temporary or permanent housing.
So the Capstone Urbana was actually opened partially out of HEAP funding, about 1.3 million, and there was additional 400,000 raised. It was part of the county's. It's a building that we rent for $1 each year for 10 years. And so we repaired the building. We actually totally tore down the infrastructure. I'll never forget walking in with a hard hat, and I thought we were just going to rearrange a couple of things, and it was broken. But we did open in a very rainy day in January, similar to what we experienced this year, and we've been serving them ever since. Schumann Hart House was primarily private funding and a little bit of government funding.
The private funding came from a gentleman who lives with his family in Carmel Valley, Mark Schumann, and they've been very, very supportive. But it does take a lot to sustain the shelters, and Mr. Schumann can't do it alone. So we do a lot of fundraising, both government and private, and both CHS and Gathering for Women to sustain both programs. Each program costs approximately $1.2 million a year to run. They're not inexpensive. They're not extravagant by any means, but we do have personnel and case management, and we do feed people, and they use electricity and water, and there's insurance and 24-hour supervision so that people are safe. We established a special purpose fund, CHS and Gathering for Women, at the Community Foundation, and donors can donate to that fund, safe and secure in the knowledge that those funds will only be used for Casa de Noche Buena. And we also have government grants that include things such as, well, HEAP was the original grant that renovated Casa, but we've had several rounds of HAP funding, several rounds of ESG, the Emergency Solutions Grant funding, and CDBG monies from primarily the city of Seaside and the city of Monterey, and then some PLHA money. Don't ask me what the acronyms stand for, but if you Google them, you'll find out. PLHA money from the city of Monterey and the city of Pacific Grove. I think it's permanent local housing. Yeah. Europe. Oh, I got two in a row. So we do have this current and near-term funding gap. And so on the next slide, you'll see we're projecting annual funding shortfalls in 26, 27, 27, 28, 28, 29, and 29, 30, and of several $100,000. It just grows with each year for both shelters. We can't sustain that without additional help, whether it comes from government sources or private sources. That's not something either of our organizations can do individually or collectively. And it's a structural deficit that just keeps growing without the introduction of new funding. So we'll be looking for government sources. We are both members of the Homeless Coalition, and we check with them frequently. We're on top of every RFP or NOFA that goes out. We're both awardees of the funding that comes through the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers. And so some of the key drivers of the gap is HAP monies are about half of what they were last year. Next year, there's no guarantees they'll be around 7. HAP 6 was just released. You might have seen it in the media the last couple of days. I know this is making everyone nervous, including the County of Monterey and the City of Monterey that run the Share Center, which is the county's largest shelter, and CHS has the contract to operate that for the city and county. I mentioned our Casa de Noche Buena special purpose funds. So without new funding streams, the start of the structural deficit begins next fiscal year. We are making it this year. Next year it starts.
So as Robin mentioned, we know that we're not the only ones. There was an organization that shut down in October. There's another one that's facing closure. I believe it's in the end of April. So we're not the only ones, but what we want to avoid is having to shut down, because we feel like these programs have proven success, and it would be devastating to the families and the women that are there and who could be in there. So our intent is to, like Robin said, to try and find different ways to collaborate, to find partnerships, to find ideas to make this work, to, of course, avoid service reductions and shelter closing, or if we have to phase in those reductions over time without additional funding or some sort of collaboration, we will face a reduction in services, elimination of case management, moving it to an overnight shelter only rather than a full-time shelter or partially or full program closure.
So I mentioned at the top of the program that what we're asking for is your partnership in maintaining the two shelters, your creative input and ideas, any guidance you could give us. I think Mayor Carbone in Sand City mentioned her police department has money that is intended to support homeless initiatives in her city. And so we're talking with her about that. It may or may not be appropriate, but she had an idea we're following up on. And there may be things like that in other cities, your city, that we're not aware of. So if it's on your radar, we hope you'll keep us in mind, because we're absolutely committed to preserving services that foster housing and economic security. And I'll just say we serve probably the most vulnerable population, except for runaway and homeless youth. And that's also a population CHS serves. But the women and the children and the families are very vulnerable, and the kids still need to go to school. And we're not, if they're not your ordinary shelters, they're special. We're having an open house Thursday, April 2nd at 3:00. You're invited to come. You can see the facility, you can take a tour, you'll meet a guest or two that will share their stories. We'll share some of our statistical successes, and you'll get a really good idea of what we do there and the impact we have on your community. Thank you very much, and we're here to answer questions.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And I know Councilmember McDonald would like to make a comment to you. Thank you for the report.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that I've been fortunate to be on the board of Community Human Services and getting to work with Robin, and been really impressed at the amount of care and dedication that everybody on the staff, everybody on the board makes sure that some of the least served people in our community are really looked out for, because what they're doing really makes a difference. This really puts people back on the path. And the other thing I wanted to point out is that Robin, who unfortunately will be retiring, she actually was just awarded the Ruth Breland Memorial Public Official of the Year Award at the chamber dinner. And so that's a really big deal, because the county also recognizes they don't generally give these to not-for-profits. It's generally for businesses, but they recognize the great value that this brings to the community. So I just wanted to make sure everyone is aware of that great honor and the great work that CHS is doing. Thank you, Robin.
Congratulations on that. Thank you very much. If any other council members, Councilmember Drury?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Ms. McRae, appreciate, acknowledge, and all your contributions to the community over the years. And both of you, thank you for doing this tireless work. I just had a question related to the funding aspect, which is it appears that even though the statistics point out that homelessness is decreasing statewide, the state is still cutting down the HAP funds. Is that a fair read of what's going on?
A lot of the funding was issued during the COVID response years, and that's obviously gone. And, I think that there's both federal cutbacks and state cutbacks, and some of the federal cutbacks impact the state's ability to continue to funnel these monies. I think there's shifting priorities, so I don't think it's necessarily all, based on a lack of funding. I think it's a shifting of funding. For example, Prop 1 that voters voted a couple of years ago to shift Mental Health Services Act money away from prevention, early intervention, and mental health services, and took a big portion of it for housing for homeless. But a lot of that's going into infrastructure, not services. So they'll build the shelter maybe, but there's no funding to operate the shelter. And homelessness was so bad just before and during COVID that the main thing was to build beds and get people off the street. And I don't think there was a lot of planning locally with our continuum, but really across the country in the continuums of how to sustain those programs. So you just got a perfect storm and a fiscal cliff and every other bad cliche you can think of.
And I think, I don't know how familiar you are with Gathering for Women, but we're a day center for homeless women and their dependents. And we are seeing an increase actually. In January, we saw 30 new women. And of course, the recent fire in the building in Monterey is going to be a huge problem, with another 78, I believe, people that are displaced, all elderly and some disabled. So there's not a lot of places for people to go. And so it's a continuing problem and the funding is going down, and that's a huge issue for us.
You have the ability to impact policy, advocate for the preservation of existing resources over building new resources, because we need to think about the sustainability of any new resource. We're having difficulty sustaining existing ones.
Understood. I appreciate that insight too. And I think the other thing that I'm hearing here is like there's a structural deficit statewide, and which is going to impact things in the future. So I would say we need to do what we can from a city perspective to see like programs like this continue to be funded or nourished. And so I would say whenever we get to it from a council perspective, I'll be looking to see what we can do here to help CHS, Gathering for Women, any such organizations that are here in the community, servicing broadly what is happening, not only for our city, but for other cities too. But appreciate the presentation. And this is a timely kind of like informational item for us to know that like this is not just the only not-for-profit organization that is facing these kinds of challenges. What I'm seeing is generally across the board, a lot of not-for-profits are being impacted by cuts. So we need to have a broader action plan on what we need to do here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Burrell.
Thank you for what you do. It's not easy work. And I think, you know, any support that we can give, any ideas that we can have, we have a lot of people in our community that have great ideas and great skill. And, you know, maybe it's something that we can all get together and work on, but congratulations on your retirement. Wish you all the best and keep doing the good work. Thank you.
Thanks very much for coming out. We appreciate it, and we'll continue to think about this issue and what we can do to help. All right.
Can I thank Lori McDonald for being your representative on our board?
Of course.
She does a great job representing your interests and the interests of the residents of Pacific Grove. She spends probably 5 hours a month, I'm guessing, maybe more, but reading the packets, preparing for the meetings, being in the meetings, on her committee work, maybe more than 5 hours a month. And she does it as your representative, and she does a fantastic job on your behalf. Good job.
Thanks a lot. We appreciate the feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that brings us to the closure of the agenda. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you everyone for participating tonight.
Good night.